Hello everyone. Today I'm gonna be featuring the Tier 10 Royal Navy Heavy Cruiser Goliath. Now before I start, I wanted to thank you guys for supporting my Twitch channel. That 100k giveaway that we're working towards, we're actually at 96,500 followers. So we're literally 3,500 followers away from hitting that 100,000 followers, which means making a huge giveaway, which I will probably spread out across the YouTube channel, the Discord, the Twitch, the Twitter. Basically, I'll try to spread it out because it's gonna be so big. So just a big thank you for you guys, everyone who's helping reach that 100k. I really appreciate it. Moving on, the Goliath. Standard battle game, so we already know this is going to be fairly passive, although one of my DDs have already managed to deny. That's kind of breaking records, I guess. Still, the Goliath. Well, the first thing that sticks out about the thing, or the ship, is of course the health pool. 58k is, well, 58.6k is a lot of health for a cruiser. I mean, it's supposed to be a heavy cruiser, and the Goliath kind of lives up to that. Speed, not exactly going to break any records. You do 33 knots, 34.6 with the speed boost. Basically, you're just as fast as a Salem or a Des Moines or a Worcester. Very standard heavy cruiser. You'll see, of course, the shells and the reload, but I'll get into those a bit more later. The ship is supposed to be a very tanky heavy cruiser, and at times I do agree that it in fact is. Against something like a Monarch, I can quite comfortably angle my armor, and honestly I'm not too afraid of eating too many hard hits, because the broadside armor is 203mm, the upper belt is 30mm, and the deck armor is 40. The bow and the stern is 25, so obviously overmatchable. So something like a Monarch, if I'm angled like this, well, he will struggle doing too much to me. The ship also has spaced armor, which means that, well, generally it should be even harder to Citadel, as some shells will be eaten by the ship itself. However, especially with Wargaming adding a lot of these 457mm guns into the game, Goliath's armor scheme isn't nearly as good as it appears to be at first glance. Let me jump out of this battle for a second and into another one, showing you an example of fighting a Thunderer. 33,000 damage even while angled. In fact, if you slow it down and look at the shells, you can see that I angle pretty much perfectly for a cruiser with a 25mm nose. I make sure that the shells land on my belt instead of my nose, in the hopes that this will mitigate the damage. Now, there's a reason why this doesn't actually mitigate any of the damage, and well, if we show the armor, you can see 25mm nose, overmatchable by 380mm guns and larger, 40mm deck armor, enough to bounce basically anything, and the belt armor 203, quite impressive. The upper belt, however, is 30mm, something that especially 457 and 430mm like the Republic can easily overmatch. Now, a standard trick, of course, when you're being shot at in a cruiser is to angle not perfectly nose in, where your nose can be overmatched, but angle in slightly in the hopes of bouncing the shells on your belt. You might get overmatched on the upper belt and eat some pens, but at least the Citadel armor will be angled, so you will not eat any of those big hits. So why did I eat 33,000 damage? Well, the issue becomes pretty clear when you start stripping away the armor. Namely, this upper belt here. This upper belt that got overmatched by the Thunderer, well, right behind it we have a flat surface Citadel. So if you try to angle this against these big caliber guns, well, you're providing a flat surface Citadel on the front. And even worse, because the Goliath, as I mentioned, has this spaced armor, the inner part of this spaced armor, the inner part of the Citadel, down here it's 38mm, enough to bounce the AP. But up here, 25. Which means if a battleship, like the Thunderer in this case, if he manages to overmatch this 30mm, well, he's guaranteed also going to overmatch this 25mm. So he will have a straight line double overmatch into my Citadel. And that's probably what happened right there. I tried to angle, but I provided a flat surface Citadel here, and an overmatchable surface here, which basically means all of this is one big flat citadel surface. And this is a pretty significant weakness, especially for a supposed super tanky heavy cruiser, since Wargaming insists on adding these 457mm guns into the game, which kind of ruin much of the purpose of trying to push in this thing. Right, jumping back into the original match. Against the Monarch, of course, with his, 381mm guns. Well, obviously he can only overmatch my stern, but my angled belt like this is more than enough to be able to tank him. So against these lower caliber battleship guns, you do very, very well. You're an extremely tanky cruiser, as long as you don't get nose-in overmatched or full broadside citadel. The ship doesn't handle particularly well. Well, you can see the acceleration, and in general, it's fairly sluggish to move both forwards and backwards. It doesn't have any of that Royal Navy super acceleration. The rudder shift is also quite poor at 12.5 seconds. I mean, even Hindenburg has 12.1, and you have an 800-meter turning circle. Once again, very Hindenburg-esque. The concealment, on the other hand, is quite good. At 11 kilometers, 7.1 plane concealment. So for a heavy cruiser, you are quite stealthy. Not perhaps Des Moines stealthy, but quite stealthy regardless. Obviously, the main guns is the next point. The main guns on the Goliath are 234mm. You got 12 of them, but the reload is pretty damn painful with a default 19 seconds. Now, with the build that I'm running, that is of course a reload mod that I enjoy, you get it down to, I think, what, 16.7 seconds to be exact. Not exactly too impressive, but the shells do punch pretty damn hard. Getting some incoming AP from the Moskva, so being forced to angle here. Of course, this thing is very, very tanky as long as you don't eat those massive, massive blaps. The turret traverse is very good. 18 seconds on the turrets, especially for a heavy cruiser, is very good indeed. The issue is, of course, when it comes down to DPM. These big guns have excellent penetration. You got some improved penetration values working there, which means that you actually penetrate 59mm of plating, which means that the Moskva, for example, that has 50mm plating, can easily be shredded by this HE. On the other hand, though, because of the very low reload on the guns, your HE DPM is only 146,000, which is, well, Henry's DPM without using a reload booster. And you basically have the same fire starting capacity as a Henry as well without the reload booster. So not exactly breaking any records, but it's not bad either. It's sick. I would say that probably like about the third worst HE DPM of all the heavy cruisers. If we only include the silver ships, then it's the second worst. So, I mean, it always could be worse, but having less HE DPM than something like a Moskva, for example, isn't exactly brag-worthy, considering that you only have 16.8k in range, and as you can probably see from the shells are actually very slow. So hitting these quick, agile destroyers at significant ranges, like 15 kilometers, for example, can prove very, very difficult, and if they're actively dodging, it feels even more so. The AP, you actually do have improved AP angles. Now, not quite as improved as something like a Salem or Des Moines. It's not super heavy AP, but it's 45 to 65 degrees instead of the normal 45 to 60 degrees AP bounce angles. So you got a bit more of a chance of getting those AP pens than, for example, a Moskva would. On the other hand, the AP DPM, 218k, which is the second worst in the game. In fact, I think the only one that has worse AP DPM than the Goliath is the Venezia, that spends most of its time shooting sap instead. So both HE DPM, AP DPM and HE DPM is very, very underwhelming. Note that you also have a pretty high fuse arming threshold of 39mm, but because of the slow shell velocity, I haven't really noticed too many overpens. Actually, you know what? I take that back. Shooting cruisers, you do get a fair bit of overpens because you struggle to arm that AP. The bigger issue than all of this is, of course, well, okay, since we're comparing to something like, let's say, a Moskva or something like a Des Moines, well, we don't have the DPM of a Des Moines, and we don't have the shell velocity of a Moskva. We don't really have the AP DPM either, and we don't have radar. We don't have a lot of tools. So do we at least have good AP penetration? And this is probably something that bothers me quite a fair bit, is that the Goliath's AP penetration is actually quite poor. It starts off, I guess you could say decent. It starts off above the Zhao, but already at 10 kilometers, Zhao's AP penetration overtakes the Goliath. And considering these are 234mm guns with no particular shell velocity behind them, the fact that you also lose out on most of your competition in penetration is in fact pretty underwhelming. In fact, even the Venezia overtakes the Goliath at 16 kilometers when it comes to AP penetration. So, not exactly particularly award-winning. That's not to say the AP is bad, because the slightly improved pen angles and so forth means that you can get some juicy chunks in. Of course not on Henry's spaced armor, but in general you can get some hard hits in. But the penetration is the AP DPM is the shell velocity is There's not a whole lot going for these guns. I'm not gonna say they're bad. You saw the overpens there, by the way. I'm not gonna say the guns are bad, but I sure can't call these guns good either. There's not really a lot going. It's average or below average. That's pretty much the performance across the board. The best thing they have going for them is the HE penetration. That's really the best gimmick. You can burn a lot of nose in battleships, of course not Kremlin, God forbid. No, Kremlin, the Soviet battleships have 60mm plating, so of course that happens to be the threshold that cannot be crossed, but you get that 59mm pen, which means you can pen every other battleship. So, very efficient HE against most targets, but that's pretty much it. As for the rest of the gimmicks, well, you got your Hydro, 5km Hydro. You can use defensive AA instead, but there's not too much of a point since your AA isn't really that good. It's got 5.8 km range. The values are okayish, and if you do build defensive AA, sure you can defend yourself fairly okay. But once again, this is not really an AA monster by any means. The torpedoes, you only have one set of them. They are 10 km torpedoes, which is of course nice. And they hit for I think what 16 point something K each, almost 17K, and they're quite stealthy, but ultimately it's still only 4 torpedoes per side, so it's a brawling threat, but it's not gonna make too much of a difference. Is that sailor really gonna sail in a straight line? Oh, I think I am too low, and that's of course the issue with the slow shell velocity, is that if they pay attention to your shells, there is quite a lot of time to turn out of the way from these Goliath shells. Not having shell velocity sucks. Used Turpits, got a Citadel in on me from that angle. Might have been overmatch, might have just been a pen. And that's of course something we need to talk about, is this super heal. The Goliath has a unique heal. It has a 60-second cooldown. It has a 80-second cooldown actually. 72 if you run, of course, the full cooldown build. It lasts for 20 seconds and it ticks for 2.4% with the flag, normally 2%. It actually heals a significant amount of your pen and your Citadel damage, so obviously this helps mitigate these incoming Citadel hits significantly, and in general helps mitigate these pens that you tend to eat all over the place significantly. But it feels like a plaster put on top of a kind of a shoddy design. Like, yeah, you got a super heal, but you kind of need a super heal because you eat so much damage from everything all the time, because you're a huge ship, you're a clumsy ship, and if you're fighting in the open, you're very easy to take pot shots at. Don't get me wrong, the heal is impressive. The heal can heal you for 30k health. Which for a cruiser is of course a very impressive value, and it means you can bait a lot of ships into thinking you're almost dead, and then you pop the super heal and you kind of rise from the dead. Basically a mini Conqueror comes to mind when it comes to trolling with the heal. However, if you seem that I don't seem very enthused about this ship, it's because, well, just like in my original commentary, I still don't really see the point of this line, well, this ship in particular. I'm not really sure what it's supposed to do. Most of the time when it comes to tanking as a cruiser, well, I don't find myself being particularly more survivable than something like a Moskva, for example. The Moskva doesn't have those citadel weaknesses that I pointed out. And Moskva has that fast-acting AP that can blap any ship across the map, same with the HE. And on top of that, it also has radar, which gives it a ton of utility. Goliath's utility is, well, it's stealthy. 11 kilometers for a heavy cruiser this survival is quite nice. And if someone is snoozing like this Salem, well, you can take some pretty nasty pot shots. But I mean, pretty much all heavy cruisers at 12 kilometers could have done that quite easily. I don't feel it brings anything unique to the table besides being a cruiser that is, if it doesn't need massive citadel hits, it's gonna be quite difficult to kill. And for a cruiser, that's not a very impressive role to fill. Because, you know, what makes cruisers good tends to be utility in terms of spotting, or harassment, annoyance, or stealth. Basically a lot of things like radar. And Goliath, well, when you get shot at you can heal a lot. That's what Goliath brings to the table. It doesn't have any special HE DPM, any special AP DPM, any amazing penetration. In fact, very mediocre values in all of this. The AA isn't that special. The armor, if it wasn't for the 457mm guns that they added... Basically, if Goliath had come out a year ago, I would have been like, holy crap, this is such a cool ship. You can basically push into all these situations and you can be this huge... You can kind of be a bit of a bully. A slow-moving bully that kind of struggles to disengage if it mispositions. That kind of bully. But in the current meta with 457mm guns coming out of everywhere... I have a hard time understanding what you're supposed to do with this thing. You run into one Thunder and you're like, well, he's gonna take pot shots at me and he's gonna have the time of his life. I'm a bit salty here. We had a points lead. The game was kind of winnable still, but one of our cruisers decided to push in and suicide. And, well, you know that it happens quite often. People decide that, well, we're winning, so we want to win harder. And, of course, that means I have to push in as well. And I've used already 2 of my heals. And, of course, the problem with these super heals is that they diminish in value as the game goes on. Because you can't heal up all the damage you take. In fact, the only damage that you can heal 100% of is fire, flooding, and ramming damage. Don't ask me why ramming is on that list. But when you hit penetrations and citadels and things that you tend to do a lot in the Goliath, well, your healing capacity drops until you see what we're seeing right now, where I can only heal a small chunk compared to that huge 30,000 potential healing that you normally could. So that means we're gonna try to push in and see if we can kill off any of the cruisers to try to even this game out. Quite optimistic at this point. Still, moving on to the role of the Goliath, I don't know what it is. I don't see it as a flank type of ship. I don't see it ever replacing something like a Zhao or a Henry IV. They bring agility, stealth, while at the same time bringing that long-range HE harassment. It's not really a good cap holder or any sort like that, because you don't have any radar to deal with DDs. Your hydro is only 5 kilometers. You can't really nose in tank either, because actually a nose is one of your greater weaknesses. You're very good against other cruisers in a straight up 1 versus 1 because of the heal and the armor and the slightly improved AP angles. But besides that, there's not really a whole lot that makes this ship stand out. Oh, Amalfi giving broadside. Can we get the kill? No, shells all don't land quite high enough. I'm not even gonna get into the issue of shells landing too low in this game. I'm pretty sure anyone who's been playing World Warships in the last couple of patches has been experiencing shells landing lower than where they aim and getting a lot of water splashes for no real reason. I've been experiencing that a lot and it's been quite frustrating. I'm thinking heavily of making a vid regarding that. Hello, we end up in a nosing situation against the Salem. Loading some HE, aiming pretty high on the belt. We do finish him off, but now we are gonna get killed off in return. And sadly, because, well, my team didn't really react in time, we had 2 kind of healthy Yoshinos. Sadly, this game will end up in a pretty close, but still a loss. 216,000 damage, 14 planes shot down, 2 kills, 10 fires, citadels. I don't think the Goliath is a bad ship. I absolutely think that you will be able to carry games in this thing. It's just that it's not a very good solo carry. If there's a DD on your flank, well, the DD is going to be a whole lot faster than you. The DD is also probably going to be able to land torps on you once your Hydra runs out. Well, okay, you can be dodging it forever, whatever, but you're not going to be stopping him. That's my point. You're not going to be able to deal with the DD in any way. And if a battleship decides to push in, well, if it's your lucky day and it's one of those ships that have low caliber guns, sure, you can do a whole lot. But let's say something like a Georgia comes steaming up around the island, well, he's gonna be in overmatched city, and because of those citadel weaknesses that I pointed out, you can't really angle against him in any way at all. Even many ships that have 30mm plating that get overmatched, they can at least just eat penetrations. They won't eat citadels, but they'll just eat penetrations by angling that belt armor. But because of that weird like basically that staircase shaped citadel that the Goliath has, well, you're gonna get citadel. And you're gonna get citadel from really wonky angles and repeatedly and frustratingly. And overall, I stand by my previous commentary on this Goliath. If we look at the detailed report, well, damage received 123,000 for a cruiser. Really sick numbers. Being able to tank 123,000, 2.2 million potential. Wow, that's crazy. That's really good for a cruiser, but so what? I'd rather have a cruiser that would have been able to tank the shells or avoid the shells or just kill targets faster so I wouldn't have had to eat so much damage. There's a whole lot of things that are better than being able to heal a lot of damage in World of Warships, and sadly Goliath really doesn't have them. Build-wise, well, I can show you guys my recommended build for this ship, since I don't actually think they're going to change these ships too much. I think they think these ships are final, so this is what we're going to see. Once again, I'm not saying Goliath is a bad ship, I just don't think it's a very good ship either. Right, module-wise, very standard. You want to be running this premium heal because it heals you so damn much. Turret survival, they tend to get knocked out a fair bit because they got that standard Royal Navy design, which means flat front, which means easy penetrations. Hydra duration, AA boost, although they're changing this on PTS, so this thing is probably going to become absolute trash, but that's something for the future. Rudder shift, you could run acceleration I guess as well, but that 12.5 second rudder shift is just so painful to deal with. Concealment, it's one of your strengths, and reload because, well, your DPM kinda needs it. Captain build-wise, if you do have Jack Dunkirk, he's obviously worth it. And build-wise, well, I've literally just dragged and dropped my Conqueror Captain on this guy. And I probably wouldn't change too much. You could change fire prevention for something like, I don't really know, maybe higher fire chance? I actually quite like fire prevention because this thing has so damn much health that of course fires deal a lot of damage. Remember that fires scale on percentage health, and reducing the fires a bit can be quite useful on a ship that has 58.6 thousand health. You don't have that extra long duration on the fires like something like a Stalingrad has, but that doesn't mean that fires won't end up hurting, especially if you run into something like a Smolensk, which, as I mentioned, will have a field day farming you because you are not particularly fast or agile, you will not be dodging a lot of shells, and the size of this ship is quite significant. There is a whole lot of Royal Navy to shoot when it comes to shooting at this ship. Anyways, that was my Goliath impressions. I hope you enjoyed it. I will talk to you guys later. If you can't be arsed, drop a follow on my Twitch. You will enjoy the giveaway that I will be making once I hit 100k followers. I can promise you that. Thank you very much.